Rob, just to kick off, you've obviously been a part of my property journey over the last few years, and you came up in 2016 and had a look at the Brisbane market. But prior to that, I think your story probably starts, I don't know, let's say 2 years before, just in your property journey. Just really quickly, maybe run through your initial purchase through to then say your Sydney purchase. And then what happened, I suppose, in the Sydney market for you from 2014 onwards?
Yeah, well, I had a place in Sydney, and basically, I was very lucky that the market had gone up. So pretty much, it was just sitting there doing not much, and I had my job, but I wasn't going anywhere, and I needed something to basically try to secure my future. So I was always umming and ahhing about it, looking at the market, looking at the thing, but I just didn't know what to look for. I mean, do I negative gear it? Do I positive gear it? Yeah, I just didn't know. And I mean, I've looked at a couple of courses, but I just didn't feel right with them. These fly-in, fly-outs, I just wasn't comfortable. So basically, since then, the property kept going up, and so I had equity in my property, and it was just a matter of trying to utilise it. And then we went up and saw you, and things opened, my eyes got opened, and things changed.
Right. So tell us about. Especially, I suppose, a couple of months before you came up, actually. We had a phone call together, really, and just tell us a bit about where you probably were in October, November of that time.
Yeah, well, in the headspace, I suppose, I was still scared. I wasn't. I didn't understand really all the implications of what could happen and all the rest of it. So there was. I understood I could use equity in my property and I can turn around and do it, but that was just buying a property. So I didn't know what to look for, and that was probably my biggest thing. Do I look for $500,000 property? Do I look for $1 million property? Do I look for $300,000 property? I didn't know, and that was where my mind was just scrambled pretty much. So I could see advantages in buying all of the above if I could service a loan, which I still wasn't even sure if I could do that. But it all came down to risk, and that was where I suppose I started waiting. We had our chat, and it was like, yep, no worries, okay, I can look for a few things. But I still didn't know what I was looking at. I was basically like in a dark room with no light, and unfortunately, I just needed that light switch turned on, which happened probably when we got up there.
Well,
that was what it really.
Tell us a bit about that. I suppose process that we went through that week. Can you, I suppose, from your point of view, just explain probably what you think or what you remember of that week?
Well, I remember we did a couple of brainstorming sessions over a few bottles of wine, which was always helpful. But pretty much it was like you showed me through basically we had coffee. You had the paper out in front of you, and you turn around and you went that. And I'm just looking at you going like, what are you talking about? And he goes, potential. I said, all right. And then you started going through them a little bit more thoroughly, and then all of a sudden you go down to these two, and I'm just looking at you going, how did you just do that in 10 minutes? And so then we actually went and did a drive-by, and your first question would be, what would you do with this property? And I'm just looking at it going, the gardening, and that was about it. Couldn't see anything past that. Maybe a paint job, Yeah. And you said, well, look, I think I can do this and this and this and this and this, and do the driveways, and that will cost about this, and this will cost about that. And all of a sudden, you were bringing out figures as well, and going, well, that should increase that, that should increase that, and I'm there going.
And we were doing this on site. Remember, we went to places in Logan, right? The ones that were selling around 350,000. The one that I get lots of people say to me, oh, that's where I want to start, right? And so we went and actually walked a couple of the 350s, right?
Yep.
And that's where you were too at the moment, wasn't it? It was in that space that was about as big as you wanted to go.
Yeah, I want to limit
my risk. The lowest risk, and that's true. I see that in a lot of people when they're talking to me. It's I can lower my risk by buying a $350,000 property at Woodridge, right? So we went to Woodridge, and after being on site, when we walked, I think 1 or 2 properties, and we walked the street. I suppose what happened for you then? What was going through your head? How confronted were you?
I was a little bit more at ease because I could see a potential, like spending $10,000 and easily putting another $10,000 to $15,000 on there. I mean, I know spending 10 to make 10, didn't seem probably doesn't seem feasible, but if you put $10,000 on after spending 10, and then you do one more thing, all of a sudden that 10 now jumps to 15 or something like that, depending on what it is. So it always seemed to be putting extra equity in the property, and in some cases easily doubling it, which was really good. And that was when I first started understanding about your trying to get back your deposit. And I thought, oh, well, okay, fair enough. So,
which in Woodridge we couldn't do, remember? Yeah. That was by walking it, we actually sort of showed that thinking going in minimum risk, we actually couldn't get our initial deposit back, so we would go in and we would be stuck.
Yeah.
And it was still low risk, but we didn't see the growth and we couldn't force the equity either at the same time. And we knew that time is against us in some cases. So I suppose, so we left Woodridge and we actually did see a couple of duplexes being made in the area. So that was a good conversation over cash flow positive.
Yeah.
Can you remember what we did after that?
We went to, I think it was around Browns Plains and stuff like that, or Logan.
Yep.
Can't remember.
And then we actually headed out, I think, to my projects, actually, I think, didn't we?
Oh, to the,
cut the chase and I actually went and walked for the first time ever.
Yeah.
I went and actually walked someone through all of my projects.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden that was like, okay, I could see exactly what you were doing.
Yep. Can you remember which ones we went to and what stood out for you in that tour?
Okay, there was one where you had the 2 houses next to each other, which looked very similar, the white brick houses, and then you said, look, all I need to do here is basically put a line down the middle, because they're 2 houses identical, and just basically split them. And I just looked at you and like, is it that easy? And he goes, pretty much, and I was like, okay, fair enough. And then when we went through some figures, the amount of growth on that, just from that split, was mind blowing. And all of a sudden I had this little this kind of thing. Not trying to be greedy, but it was. I could see potential.
It's seeing potential, opportunity for the first time. It's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quick question on back to Woodridge now. Like, so if I said to you, let's go for a trip to Woodridge, right? What's your reaction to that?
Look, I mean, there probably is a market there for some people, but not for me.
Yep.
I mean, I'd lived in